Here's what you missed between 1877 and 1900. The time period, as Mark Twain once said, was the Gilded Age. The Gilded Age started off with a bang as the presidential election of 1877 ended with the compromise. That entailed for the federal troops to pull out their soldiers from the South to unofficially end Reconstruction, and in return, President Rutherford B. Hayes would assume presidency and take over the Oval Office. However, this election wasn't accompanied by good faith, as we would have expected it to be, and instead, wealth, greed, and corruption came to define this era. Big corporations or businesses, such as the railroad industry, were backed up by the federal government, most evidently seen with the Supreme Court ruling of the Interstate Commerce Act, which overturned state efforts to control the railroads. Furthermore, railroad companies headed by Cornelius Vanderbilt would provide the government favorable rates to move their goods across the nation. Captains of industry like Rockefeller with Standard Oil and Carnegie with the steel industry came to decimate all their competitors through means of vertical and horizontal integration, which consequently led to the foundations of monopolies. The Republican-ran government at the time favored high tariffs in order to foster, nurture, and help grow these big businesses. You ask yourself, who will come work for and give into the dominance of these large-scale monopolies? Well, the answer is simply the German and Italian immigrants who so desperately wanted to find jobs in the factories that was provoked by the start of the Second Industrial Revolution during this time. But let's step away from talking about the growing power and influence of these large-scale industries and let's revisit the troublesome American government of this time. First, it's to be known there was a split in the Republican Party, which divided into the stalwarts, the half-breeds, and the mugwumps, each having their own respective beliefs on how to appoint governmental officials. But hold on a second. The Democratic Party was also split, as in the South, they were split into the white supremacy Southerners, immigrant stock urban machine members, and business-oriented advocates, all opposing traditional Democratic beliefs. In response to the ongoing corruption circulating through America throughout the Gilded Age, the farmers in the Midwest organized the Populist Party. They simply addressed the needs of farmers and laborers and wished for more government regulation of railroads, a graduate income tax to redistribute the wealth, and to be taken off the gold standard so they can finally pay off their enormous debts. They posed as a huge threat, being a third party with the candidate William Jennings Bryan, but unfortunately they lost the election. And still, during this time period, the African Americans faced ongoing hardships from the Jim Crow laws and the KKK in the South. Not to mention that white politicians limited African American voting abilities through poll taxes and literacy rates.
President McKinley increased, and continued to increase tariffs until they reached a record tax of 48% on foreign products under the McKinley Tariff of 1890. And obviously, this was very unpopular amongst the people. The ongoing corruption, supplemented by the tariff, led to the Panic of 1893, where Congress repealed Sherman's Silver Purchase Act. It was so bad that President Cleveland had to accept gold from J.P. Morgan to help U.S. Treasury. The economic depression led many workers to become socialists. For example, Eugene Debs was a socialist worker in charge of the Pullman strike. On the topic of workers striking, there was also Coxey's army of unemployed workers that pushed the government to issue unbacked paper money to increase spending. Some from the upper class actually tried to help the poor. There was Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth that addressed the way that money should be distributed. He said it was the rich man's responsibility to provide for the poor. To close off the Gilded Age came the election of President William McKinley, Republican, in 1896. He supported the gold standard and ended up winning the election. On the opposing side, the Democrats and Populists chose William Jennings Bryan for the election, who supported free silver. The Spanish-American War started in 1898 and led America out of this time period. The results of the fighting between U.S., Spain, and Cuba and Filipinos showed America's desire to expand overseas. In the end, Cuba gained its independence and U.S. gained control of Puerto Rico, Guam, and Philippines. The Treaty of Paris of 1898 ended the war with Spain and allowed the U.S. to dominate Oriental trade. All throughout the country, there was a new sense of social Darwinism that pressured the U.S. to seek land outside their domain in order to keep up with the European powers such as Britain and France. Admiral Alfred Thayer Mahan encouraged the U.S. to build up their navy for defense and foreign commerce. After highlighting the important events in the Gilded Age, it is important to examine what contributions came from this time. First, we have the beginning of our complex trading relations with China, which came about in 1899 when the Open Door Notes were signed. Louis Sullivan really helped bring city life to what we know it as now, with skyscrapers in major cities such as New York. Yellow journalism, although not around forever, started here as a means of information. Out of the many inventions, some of the most important are iron, cash register, solar cells, machine guns, and trolley poles for transportation. And lastly, literature. Edward Hopper was a well-known realist painter who painted scenes from both urban and rural life that are still looked at today.